This is Natalie Rolls, and you are listening to the Bill Podcast. Presented by Patrick Stratford. Brought to you in association with GeorgeFairbrother.com, shop.saturdaymorningpress.co.uk, vanguardcomics.co.uk, gibconsultancy.co.uk, mcr-seo.com, and johnspillane.com.
The intergalactic powers of Jotus and Nebula are fighting over the planet Earth. One wants to pull it away. The other needs to destroy it. The safety of our planet rests within a Guildford hospital. On the road to Doctor Who, but in the shadow of Quatermass, The Big Pull, a lost 6-part BBC serial, has been retold by TV historian Michael Seeley on the Saturday Morning Press Substack. Enjoy free weekly articles at michaelseeley.substack.com. And that was me trying to hide my accent. It's Oliver here. I hope you are all well. Welcome back to the Bill Podcast. Michael Seeley's articles are absolutely brilliant. If you're here listening to this podcast, chances are you're interested in television and television history. So please do check out his Substack. There are some wonderful articles on there, some real treats. So do check out his Substack. And my huge thanks to all 6 of our sponsors and all our Patreon supporters. Please do join us at patreon.com/The Bill Podcast. I hope you all enjoyed part 1 of Patrick's fantastic interview with Dominic Power. Part 2 is even better. There's loads of Bill Goldust in here. So sit back, relax, and enjoy part 2 of Patrick's interview with Dominic Power.
When the show had come to an end and we'd got the news, it was being axed. The producer, Jonathan Young, he said to me, it's a real shame because you were going to be really busy next year. Ooh. I think from those eps was born a kind of, we can trust it. Because they play it safe. They play it safe on lots of programs like this. There was a kind of a tier level of who got the most eps and stuff. And you'd have the 5 people that would be in pretty much every ep, which could be a bit of a poison chalice because you'd see them some days and they would be absolutely exhausted. It was a really exhausting shoot some days because and the driving to sets, to locations, it was always locations, it was always stunts. And that during a shoot would be, it's tough going. And I'd see the guys that were being used heavily just hit walls constantly,
Who would you say amongst the cast were your closest friends?
You sort of hung around with the people that you were with. Definitely Micah and Ben Richards and Ali Bastian, Rhea, and because we were like the uniform. And the weird thing was, there was a kind of crossover into real life between uniform and CID. It was a kind of strange divide, but it was mainly because we'd worked together, so we'd be in our little cliques, We had a lot of fun. John Bowler, and just working places in London that you wouldn't necessarily, go at night and stuff if you didn't live there, to suddenly being dressed as a copper in these environments. I mean, doing a chase scene. There was so much stuff that we couldn't do today. It just we wouldn't be allowed. I mean, I remember doing we had to do a chase scene through Waterloo Station during rush hour. And they could get away with it because they're shooting it on a long lens from far away. And it's like, so we say to the director or the first AD, how do we get through the crowd of people trying to get home? And they said, well, you shout, move, please. And that was, and I remember one time we were at one of the major London train stations, and John Bowler, we're all in uniform waiting to go on to do our bit and stuff, and while they're setting up lights and cameras, and we're just in the stations, people all walking past, and John Bowler's just sat on his, he's in uniform and he's reading his newspaper, and an old lady came up to him and asked him directions for somewhere. Do you know the way? And he was like, "No, sorry, darling, I don't know." And then went back to his paper. And he's just obviously forgot that he sat there in a police uniform. She's assumed he's a copper. And she just looked like, God, the world's gone to hell in a handcart. She had that look on her face. She was completely dismayed. It was brilliant.
Brilliant. And what would be an average day of working on the bill? Were they quite hectic days?
To be honest, looking back, it had to be a tight ship. How they managed to do it, it was such because a lot of the crew that they got there had been there from young, and so everyone just knew what their role and what they were doing, and they had to, because there were stunts, and stunts are dangerous, and so, but also they take time, and you're filming on location, so it just, to me now, certainly since other productions I've worked on, it was clockwork. A day would start. I remember some days you'd sort of forget what you were doing if you're in sort of days, and you'd get your sides in the morning, someone would get your breakfast, really lovely. That never happened to me since. And the food was free and the canteen was brilliant. Apparently everyone put on a stone in their first year. It was great times. But I remember, so you'd go to your dressing room, but you'd have to pass the supporting artist room. And I remember the mornings walking to my dressing room, passing the supporting artist room, and there'd just be loads of stunt guys in there. And I'm like, oh shit, we've got a pub fight today. Because you're going to get hurt. You're going to get a few knocks. But there's also, because you're an actor, you sort of think, oh shit, I've got to, you sort of feel you've got to do it for real. All the stunt guys were amazing, But yes, so that would be the day at start. Often we'd end up getting into the van, going off to location. You'd put your headphones in, you go back to sleep. I remember once we had this bus and it had one of those clear fronts and it had a side passenger seat. So it was floor to ceiling glass. And I remember it stopped at a zebra crossing, and Gary Lucy sat in the front, asleep, dribbled down his mouth, headphones in. And it stopped at the zebra crossing. All these schoolgirls pass. One of them notices him. They all scream and go, Gary Lucy, Gary Lucy, Gary. He's oblivious. He's like asleep, headphones in. I'm like, that's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. Brilliant. And there's so many memories like that on the bill. And then you get to location or whatever, and you prepare for whatever the day brought you. I mean, when we did the football hooligan stuff, there were a lot. I mean, we spent the day sort of doing that force thing, trying to, stop the crowds from getting through. Now, all right, there wasn't the thousands because they CGI'd and it looked great, like thousands of people. But there were a good 100 people pushing against a line of like 10 of us. And I remember the next day we had to continue shooting, and my back had just seized up. And I was like to everyone, and it happened to a lot of them, all you could smell in the Winnebagos and the trailers was deep heat, because everyone was smothered in it the following day. Wow. Because, it's a strange thing that when you're an actor. I mean, I remember the first chase scene I did. I hadn't run hell for leather like that for years, and it, the next day I could barely walk. It was really embarrassing. So I had to think, right, shit, I've got to get my fitness up here now.
And I imagine there's a number of night shoots as well. There's one scene involving you and Rhea Bailey. You're going to break the news of a death, but you decide to do a coin toss, heads or tails, and Sally Rogers as Jo just notices this and just gives you both just a bollocking for it.
Do you know what? I don't remember that one, but it's amazing because I recently, before your email, sort of saying, oh, these might be the episodes we'll be talking about, recently went down a bit of a rabbit hole because I'm writing these scenes and I'm writing these showreel scenes, and I'm like, right, I need the language because an interrogation scene is a great showreel scene. But I just need the language of the cops. So I was watching Line of Duty, I was watching American cop shows for American scenes. And I thought, what am I doing? I watched a bunch of the bill. So I sort of, and the moment I started watching it, I just went down a rabbit hole because I couldn't watch playback. Playback is the thing that after the tape, you go back to the monitor and you check that, it looks all right and whatever else. I can't do it. I'm too self-critical. It would just get in my head and I'd be useless. So I avoid it at all costs. And then even when it comes out, when the show came out, I really struggled watching it. I'd have to watch it 5 times to get over my vanity before I could see whether my performance was any good. Because it's hard seeing yourself back on TV. It's like hearing your own voice, But years later, I look back. So now I'm looking back at stuff that I was doing back then, and I'm like, wow, I was good. I should have been more happy with what I'd done at the time. And and I just went down a rabbit hole. I just watched a bunch of episodes, and it was so heartwarming. It just brought back so many lovely memories, and I was like, I could see how much I cared as well. So it's interesting that you say that, because I could see, going, oh man, maybe I've slacked off a little bit over the years, but yeah, and also just watching, man, the production values, because the Bill were the first sort of regular show, or the first show really to use Steadicam, and that was incredible. It wasn't until I started the Bill that I realised that there was a trope that they stuck to, which was that every scene, it was POV. Every scene had to have a copper in. You never had a scene without a copper in. And I didn't realise that. And if you speak to people, lots of people that watch the Bill for years don't realise that. It's such a clever little part of the jigsaw, that it's an investigation. So we don't know. You are following the police in real time in that sense. Great.
An interesting time, 2009, was when the show moved into HD and went into that more grittier tone. And there were a number of cast changes during that time. What do you recall of that period of the show changing?
It definitely had an impact. It was a really good lesson as an actor on this level. It was a really good lesson as an actor, because for a soap, there's no music usually. There's no music unless it's Hollyoaks. There's no so you talk. You have to talk, otherwise it's dead space. You don't, you can't really have moments of pause and reflection as such if you watch soaps. And this is an investigation program, so there should be a lot of thinking going on. So it went from 8 o'clock to looking at a wall of suspects, and you'd have to talk and go, well, da 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 da. Suddenly there was music on it, and it was shot a bit more filmically in 24 frames a second, and you could be stood at the suspect board just looking and thinking. And at the end of the scene, there's kind of a thing in soaps and stuff where you do an end of scene sign. Lots of directors asked you to do it. I always refused, even when at 8 o'clock. That kind of end of the scene going, but he's your dad. What? That kind of just to punctuate the end of the scene, because it would be weird to punctuate it where you're just staring. But I refused to do the end of scene. I remember on Emmerdale once, Kelvin Fletcher went round the whole cast during lunchtime and just filmed everyone's end of scene sign. But with music then at 9 o'clock, the music is the end of scene sign. The music is the that punctuates the end, and you don't have to do a thing, because the music will do that transition, will do that punctuation. And some directors don't know that. Some directors still don't kind of get that, or some productions, I should say, because a lot of directors on these kind of shows have to tick a certain, there's a remit box to tick,
We mentioned Jonathan Young earlier, and there's also the series producer Tim Key. What were they like to work with as producers, and how much input did you all have as actors to your characters in terms of your dialogue with Tim and Jonathan?
Didn't really have much to do with Jonathan while I was there, to be honest. Only at sort of certain times and meetings. What was good about the Bill is we were all assigned a line producer. So if we had problems or we were tired or exhausted, we could go to someone. It wouldn't be going to the boss, and that was quite nice to have. I think that, the duty of care was pretty good, I think, there back then. Tim Key was great. Yeah, he was the one that kind of was there from the beginning. He was the one at the castings. I believe, because I've worked with her since, Cara Manley was my biggest cheerleader, apparently, behind the scenes, trying to get me in. When other people were going, no, I want to cast this guy, you know. So I owe loads to Cara, and I've worked with her since, and on Suspects, and that was amazing. That was great. Yeah. So I've got a Cara. I haven't seen her for a while, but I'll have to check in on her. But yeah, Tim was great, you know, and Tim was, you know, he was always really passionate about it, and he knew the snobbery around the bill. And he was fighting for it to be, because he hated it being called a soap. He wanted it to be called an ongoing drama. And we went into that place that they called at the time immersive viewing at 9 o'clock. I mean, I understand, you know, TV's a funny place and they have to make tough decisions sometimes. But man, it was getting more viewers than a lot of shows get nowadays. You know, I mean, obviously it was expensive to run because of the stunts and the size of the cast, and obviously the old contracts that were still in place that they couldn't afford to keep up and whatever else. But when the bill finished, there was a hole of cop dramas that you know. And if you go back and you look at them now, man, they were, you know, bloody hell, to be doing that every week, just incredible, really, when you think about it. Incredible.
I mean, it just seems baffling because the show had won the BAFTA for Best Continuing Drama, and yet the following year it was axed.
Yeah. Do you know what? And that, because I was there at that BAFTAs, and we just weren't expecting, you know, it was a last minute, do you want to go? And I was sat at the back, I can't remember who with, but, you know, because we weren't at the front, because we weren't due to get anything. And then we did. We got this thing, and we were like, bloody hell. And we had to sort of walk down, and that was a really strange experience because, you know, that's my first proper ongoing job. And I'm stood on stage at the BAFTAs looking at everyone I've ever known from TV, you know, from childhood, you know, Trevor McDonald's. I mean, if there's ever footage of that, I don't think I could look up. I just looked at the floor, because looking up into that crowd just gave me vertigo. My knees would have gone. I was so nervous, you know. Sensitive soul, me. Gentle, sensitive butterfly. But I think that's sometimes what they do. You know, they go, here's a handshake, here's a thank you. And it feels like at that moment when the award was given, it was kind of the beginning of the goodbye.
How did you feel when you all heard the news?
Everyone was devastated. You know, everyone was devastated because it felt like it hadn't been in such a great place. It felt like it was just moving into the future. When they got it right, man, it was just brilliant storytelling. Yeah, it just felt bizarre, and everyone was so sad. Everyone was so sad, but at the same time, you know, everyone just sort of went, well, let's just make this the best we can. And so for that last period, everyone just absolutely threw everything at it and smashed it, you know.
And we touched upon it earlier. It seemed that there were plans for Leon's character had the series continued. Were you privy to any further details beyond that, or?
No, none at all. No, but probably good, because, you know, I watch it now, I'm like, oh, you know. I mean, I remember when I started Emmerdale, one of the first bits of press I did was as the new character. They're asking about the camera and the character, and I was talking about it. And then right at the end of the interview, it was like an hour-long interview or whatever, and right at the end, they went, what do you miss about the bill? I was like, okay, well, loads. I miss the running in the streets, the chase scenes, the, you know, camaraderie, you know, and that was it. Okay, thanks very much, bye. The headline in the paper the next day, remember, I've just started a new job at Emmerdale. The headline was, Dominic Power misses the bill. Doesn't go down. I had to explain to the producers at Emmerdale, look, this was right at the end. I didn't say that. I said, they asked me what I missed about it, but because there was so much fun. I mean, Lucy Pargeter at Emmerdale, oh God, it's so embarrassing actually. She used to do this clicker thing, like a counter, every time I mentioned the bill.
Oh.
Yes, because I'd constantly go, listen, when I was on the bill, because I had just so many stories to tell. And it's so different from just being in a soap where you're just in a studio all day or multicam. You're not going to get as many stories, you know, as you would, having to dive into the Thames or do a chase scene through Brixton.
Touching on Emmerdale there, what was that transition like, going from one high profile show to another, and becoming a soap serial killer?
It was really good training for me, because it was a really fortuitous transition coming from the Bill, because it had given me a few years to really sort of get used to being on camera and get used to not doing anything, keeping my performance kind of low key. And then, because there's nowhere to hide on multicam, and suddenly going on to multicam in a studio, it took a transition, took a period for me to get used to it. And look at some of the performances I gave were god awful, but I eventually, I found my flow. And I remember one of the actors at the time saying, "Oh, your performance, it's not very nice," but saying your performance is quite boring, isn't it? I was like, "Mate, I'm just not going to do pantomime like you," and because I just couldn't. It's just not how I was trained. I can't do that. I'd look terrible. It was a kind of transition, but it paid off. I was doing another interview at Emmerdale, and they were asking about the character, and I was like, "Oh yeah, he's an everyman. He just wants to do right by Debbie Dingle, and he's a nice guy, and maybe a bit misunderstood, but he's got he's got a good heart and stuff." And I just started, because I didn't really know what to do with the character, and we were just sort of treading water a little bit. And then I come out this long phone interview where I've talked about the character being a nice guy, and Stuart Blackburn's there, and he's like, "Oh, we need to talk about camera." I was like, "Why is that?" He goes, "Because he's a," and I'm like, "What?" He goes, "He's a serial killer. Like, he's gonna," I was like, "Where the hell?" And I remembered the day before, or a couple of days before, I'd done a scene with Kelvin Fletcher, and whilst Kelvin Fletcher's not taller than me or anything, his arms, certainly at the time, were like as wide as my back. And I had to do a scene where I was, confronting him and stuff. I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. He'd popped me in the ground with his fist. And so I thought, well, the only way I can do that now is to just go a little bit psycho. So I had to threaten him. So I'm kind of, as I'm talking to him, I'm sort of pulling bits of fluff off his jumper, and it was just cold and menacing in a way that I think they went, "This is what we do with Cameron. He's got to stop,"
And how much of that experience working on Emmerdale transitioned over to, well, what you're doing currently now on Hollyoaks?
Yeah, there's been a big hiatus. It's because I think what's also fed into it is all the film making I've done and understanding the cameras. I have a part of my spectrum, I guess, is that it's a weird thing. I always refer to it as a kind of like a spatial dyslexia, which is not useful for an actor because you need to know where to be and stuff. And the amount of times I would walk the wrong side of camera on the bill at the end of a scene. I remember one time at the bill, the crew taped down, to take the piss, taped down a massive arrow pointing which way, because I'd done it wrong so many times. My brain, I can walk in a room 1 minute. When I leave the room, my memory of the room is inverted. It's all back to front. So it's very strange. It's very strange that I don't have a flag on my car so I can find it in a car park. But it's that, I can walk in a room 1 minute, try and leave via the broom cupboard. 30 seconds later, my brain just doesn't. And I remember Gary Love, when he directed an episode of The Bill, just stopping me one time. He goes, "You've got no idea where the camera is, have you?" I'm like, "Nope." And it's taken this long now, being still not great. Because even if I'm working with a child actor, whoever I work with will generally have to just, and I tell them to begin with, I go, "Look, this is the thing. This is not just me being lazy or a bit, dopey." And I say to them, "Feel free to move me during a scene if I'm in the wrong spot." And so sometimes I will get them just tug the back of my shirt just to move me into where I'm supposed to be, because my brain just can't cope with all that information. By the time I'm on Hollyoaks, even though I still have people moving me by tugging my shirt, I'm a lot better. So it's taken me a lot longer than it would most people to have an understanding of where the camera is and why that's important. And certainly on something that's like a soap where it's quite fast every day. So that was, that's definitely something that I've learned. But also what's been great is, and what's also sort of just spurred me into wanting to go back to coaching, or wanting to incorporate coaching into my career again whilst acting, is working with the younger actors. And it might be that, a lot of the time, some of the guys that I've been working with on Hollyoaks, it's been their first jobs since leaving drama school and stuff. And so, I'm sort of the older player now, and I can sort of go, well, and because I've coached, for 30 years, I can kind of have a way of explaining it to people that I think might land. And then I realise I'm when it comes to acting, and I've always believed that this is what you have to be in order to be the best sort of actor you can. Certainly for me, and that's to be an anorak. That's to be a train spotter. If someone wants to talk to me about acting, I can talk all day, until they're really bored of me. I guess that's the teacher in me, that's the coach in me, but it's also someone who's passionate about acting, and the craft and the mystery of the craft.
I watched your appearance in Suspects, and again, a phenomenal performance. What was that experience like, particularly given the sort of improvisational nature of the show, and having such a unique character to play in that situation?
I nearly didn't do it because I only had 2 weeks to prepare from getting the job, and it was an improvised cop show, alarm bells already, and it was playing a schizophrenic who was selling his medication, who didn't know whether or not he was responsible for murdering someone. It's a lot, And so I kind of, I just bit the bullet. I just went, yeah, fine, it's Cara Manley, who I trust. And I was really nervous about it because, like I've already said, it's about being in the zone. I watched endless footage for 2 weeks of interviews with people who were schizophrenic and sufferers, and how that can manifest, and certainly manifested if they avoid taking their medication. And there's obviously, I'm not a schizophrenic. I've not lived with a schizophrenic sufferer. I was very conscious of also not doing sufferers a disservice, people that suffer from the condition a disservice, and not playing the sort of hand up, stereotype version of that. And again, in just the way that I approach all of things, it has to start with a truth, a truth. What would it feel like if someone said you murdered someone? What would that fear? Certainly if you hadn't, and so I had to let that land. I had to let that sit. It was fast. I mean, the crew that they had on there was a documentary crew, essentially. So it was all filmed like a sort of documentary. In the interview rooms, there was no cameraman in there. It was CCTV. So you're living in the real moment. And you had the script, which had the beginning and the end, and roughly what was going to happen to get from A to B. And the rest was down to you. And it was fast. And so, because I would usually say on the first day, I was saying to the third AD, can you get me on set the scene before, just so I'm prepped and ready? By the second day, I'm saying, can you get me on set 4 scenes before, because they were shot so quickly. Yeah, I just remember just kind of being in the zone. And I think some of the regular actors were taken by surprise by it, because they didn't break character, because there's no time to break character. And especially when you're in such a deep place. And I think, it sort of threw them. But I quite like that. I quite like the fact that sometimes bring an actor, certainly if they're a regular, because sometimes when you're a regular actor, you can sort of start to sort of just, phone it in a little bit. That's only natural if you're doing it all day, every day for, weeks and weeks on end. It can happen. But it's nice if you offer something to the scene that suddenly brings them back into the zone and makes them go, oh yeah.
What are your hopes and ambitions for the future?
Well, I hadn't acted for ages before Hollyoaks, and I sort of got into filmmaking and found that sort of, that I loved doing that, but then sort of going back to Hollyoaks has sort of rekindled my love for acting, and it reminded me, oh yeah, I'm quite competent at this. So I'm keeping my options open. I mean, at the moment, I'm kind of doing the best of both worlds because I'm managing to work as an actor. I've just got back from Japan shooting a Japanese submarine film,
Wow.
which I can't say too much about. This is going out after I leave Hollyoaks, so I can say that I've left Hollyoaks. All my efforts are sort of in between, just kind of making building the course up and trying to secure, because everything that I do now in terms of acting, whether it's self-tapes that I'm doing, I feed back into the course and I show potential students exactly what I'm doing. Be interested to see where it goes next.
And there's always rumours of a return for the bill. Do you think it should come back? And if so, why?
I mean, obviously, I'm going to say yes, and I think it should, because I think if it did, it'd have to do it differently because we couldn't do it like we did. So it'd have to find those differences. I don't know whether or not it even could come back in the same way, because would you have the same crew that managed to do what we did in that way, because they had all those years of experience of knowing exactly where everything went. TV nowadays, it's all heading online. The terrestrial channels will be a thing of the past in a few years, I think, because everything will be like a Netflix or a Amazon Prime Video. So it'd have to be built for that format, and I think it definitely could. I mean, it's the way in which the stories are told about coppers in London. I mean, what's not to like? I watch other cop dramas, your Line of Duties, the thing set in Liverpool.
Oh yes, The Responder.
The Responder. I get it. It's got some great writing on it, obviously, and it's a lot of time. I think, man, the difference between compared to what we were doing on a weekly basis all year round, give the bill 8 episodes once a year and see what happens,
And do you think you would ever return?
I would take their arm off. I would be in there like a shot. 100%. It was just so much fun, It was an experience of a lifetime, and if I ever got the opportunity to repeat it, I definitely would.
And what is your message to fans of the bill and fans of Leon who will be so happy that you've agreed to do this?
Man, it's just so lovely, and it's testament to the show itself that the fans, this many years on after its passing, are still sort of enthusiastic about it and still kind of watch it. I mean, this is the thing I still get now. When I first moved to Liverpool in Hollyoaks, people only recognise me from the bill. Oh, you were in the bill, and because it's still on, I think people still go back to watch it regularly. If something can become timeless like that, then that's a testament of it being great.
Dominic Power, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, my friend. Thank you, Patrick. It's been a pleasure.
You're a phenomenal actor.
Oh, bless you. That's so kind. That's so kind.
This is Natalie Rolls, and you have been listening to the Bill Podcast. Brought to you in association with GeorgeFairbrother.com, shop.saturdaymorningpress.co.uk, vanguardcomics.co.uk, gibconsultancy.co.uk, mcr-seo.com, and donspillane.com. The Bill Podcast is produced by Oliver Crocker and co-produced by Ben Adams, Glenn Cooney, Bryony Kelly, Maz Mirabilis, Alex Mockler, and Simon Wolfe. Our executive producers are Isabel Allen, Mark Bennett, Christopher Booth, Rob Cook, James Crissell, Rebecca Deeprose, Alana Dewar, Andrew Dyack, Dan Evans, George Fairbrother, Stuart Gibbon, Vicky Greatbanks, Luke Hegarty, Robert Hoger, Edward Kellett, James Ledane, Thomas Johnston, Dave Meakin, Gary Moncur, Danny Morris, Steph Morris, Laura Pinney-Fay, Isaac Powell, Alistair Wrigley, Michael Seeley, Don Spillane, Angel Stannard, Paul Statter, Patrick Stratford, and Sarah Went. Huge thanks to all you lovely producers who make the Bill Podcast possible. for over 200 hours of bonus content. Visit patreon.com/The Bill Podcast.